1.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's meeting of our Newcastle-under-Lyme Borough Council's Planning Committee. I propose to take the agenda as printed, so we'll start with item 1, apologies this evening. Do we know of any apologies? I have received none. In that case, let us progress to item 2 of our agenda, declarations of interest on items this evening. Are there any such declarations members wish to make? Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I may wish to make a declaration on 2 items on the agenda. Item 5, I work for the Harper and Keele Veterinary School and therefore I am unable to determine anything on this matter. I will not take part in the discussion whatsoever or vote on that matter. And item 7, whilst I work for the university and have no major pecuniary interest, I have had some involvement with this and therefore I feel it would be imprudent for me to be involved. So I too will not engage with the conversation or vote on that matter.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Are there any further declarations of interest from other members this evening?
Yes, for myself, Councillor Cooper, I work for Keele University also, although I haven't had any involvement in any of these particular projects.
I think that in that case, Councillor, that this is a non-pecuniary interest. I think you'd be entirely within your rights to vote on the matter if you so wish to do.
Okay, thank you.
Any further declarations of interest this evening? In that case, let's progress to item 3 of our agenda, which is minutes of the previous meeting. These have been circulated, and I look to members to see if they feel they are a correct record of our proceedings.
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed.
Looking round, I see no dissent, so I'm going to take those minutes as a correct record. That brings us to our first substantive item this evening, item 4, application for major development, land off Chemical Lane, Tunstall. We have a report in front of us. I look to our officer to see if there is any further information that we need to consider before we proceed to a debate.
No, we've not got any further information to report. We're still waiting for the consultation response of the lead local flood authority.
Right.
So the second part of recommendation A applies, where we're seeking delegated authority to be given to the head of planning to determine the application upon receipt and consideration of their comments.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Moulton. It's a little disappointing we don't have that this evening, but I now invite comment from members. If we have no comments, Councillor Moffat.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say that seeing as that important report hasn't been received yet, that we defer this. So I think we have until April the 16th. And therefore, do we have another planning meeting before that deadline date?
Before I ask our officer to comment, I think Councillor Holland wished to say something. Councillor Holland? You're muted, Councillor, if you do.
Thank you, Chair. Only to say that I've moved the recommendation as printed on the basis that we can delegate authority to our officers on this one. And if we are happy with everything, apart from having seen that lead flood authority report, I see no reason why we shouldn't vote on it tonight.
Councillor Cooper. You're muted, Councillor, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Chair. I agree. I think we could vote on it tonight. I think it is would be a valuable development for the area of Bradwell. But the only thing I wanted to ask about was the questions around the police crime prevention design advisor's comments, which were suggesting that we satisfy that we consider the measures that have been incorporated to avoid sort of criminal opportunity. So I just wondered if the officers had anything further to say on that.
Let's ask our officer. We will go there first, and then we'll come back to Councillor Northcott, who I think also wishes to speak.
Well, we have every reason to believe that the applicant has incorporated all the necessary measures to ensure that the site is safe. It's obviously within their interest to do so. I note that we haven't recommended a condition to agree such security measures. Just quickly looking through the list of recommended conditions, it would be a perfectly reasonable condition to impose to seek prior approval of any security measures, and if anyone wished to move such an additional condition, then there would be no objections to that. So, but yes, there is nothing further to report. We consider that the applicant has addressed those, but it would be appropriate to include a condition if required.
In that case, I'll just ask Councillor Cooper if she wishes to move such an amendment. I can't hear you, Councillor, I'm afraid.
I'm sorry, I think it's these headphones. When I've got them in, I don't think you can hear me. Apologies. I think that would be a sensible approach given the advice supplied on this matter.
Okay, before we in a moment I'll look for a seconder there, but first of all I think Councillor Northcott, I mean, maybe the same issue, maybe a different issue, wishes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chair.
For heavens, promotion.
Yes, I've been using the word quite a bit today, but take it while it lasts. I was going to mention the issue that Councillor Cooper has just raised in terms of the safety aspect, and I would be happy to second the amendment that was brought forward by the officer. This is a valuable site in terms of employment in Newcastle, and I think we should not defer it, and I think I'd go with Councillor Holland's suggestion that we decide upon this and determine this and vote on this tonight. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Now then, as we see, given we haven't received the Leeds Flood Authority's report, we move to the recommendation which says we can do that with delegation. What I want to know is whether there is anyone who wishes to second Councillor Moffat's motion that we defer until we receive that report, or whether we are content, in fact, to take that as a delegated power. So my first question is does anyone wish to second Councillor Moffat's motion of deferral?
My understanding is that that the determination expires in March, not April, as Councillor Moffat suggested.
I can assist that. Yes, at the moment, the date by which we are to determine the application, the agreed date, is the 9th of March.
Yeah.
The 16th of April date is the date set out in recommendation B, which is the date by which the recommended section 106 obligations should be secured by, or we're recommending that it's secured by that date. We anticipate that if the recommendations are accepted tonight, that the applicant would agree to a further extension of the target date, the determination date, so it can still be determined in time upon completion of the obligation before the 16th of April. And just to clarify in terms of the recommendation with regard to the lead local flood authority comments, we're anticipating that anything that they now say on receipt of that additional information that has been submitted can be addressed through conditions. However, if they do come back with comments that suggest that further information is required or that the application should be refused, we would bring the application back to committee at the first available date for committee to determine it. So we're only seeking authority to deal with their comments if they're recommending that we can permit subject to conditions.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Moulton. I think Councillor Moffat wishes to speak again.
Yeah, just thank you for that clarification. I do see that it is the 9th of March, so obviously deferment isn't really an option, because I'm broadly in support of this application. But I am also aware of just how awful the flooding has been in various areas. So, yeah, I mean, like you say, thank you, Elaine. You would bring it back if there was any serious kind of concerns about that come out of that report. So I withdraw my concern and suggestion of deferring, just to make things straightforward and simple.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Are there any other contributions members wish to make before we proceed to a vote? In that case, what I propose to do is, since we've had the crime prevention measure proposed as an additional condition, I propose to take a vote with that included, and if that falls, we will then take a vote on the original recommendations printed. So first of all, we'll take a vote on this with the additional condition as proposed by Councillor Cooper. Again, I'll take the vote by name, and I'll do it on the screen as I see in front of me. Sometimes the computer plays tricks, so if I do ask any member whose name I don't call at the end, please make me aware of that fact. So, Councillor Williams.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Reddish.
Permit with the added amendment.
Councillor Jones.
Permit.
Councillor Owen.
Permit.
Councillor Moffat.
Permit with Councillor Cooper's additions.
Councillor Holland.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Mrs. Jill Williams.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Cooper. I can't hear you, I'm afraid, Councillor. You're muted.
I'm sorry, it's a permit, Chair. Sorry.
Councillor Northcott.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Burgess.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Maxfield.
Permit, Chair.
I believe I have now called all members, and if I'm correct in that, that recommendation is passed unanimously. We can now proceed to our next item. My understanding is that we have a speaker, Mr. Kavanagh, on this item. Is that correct?
Yes, Chair, I'll just admit him.
So I'd say good evening to Mr. Kavanagh. I hope you can both see and hear me. Is that correct?
Good evening. I can both see and hear you. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Before we invite you to address the committee, I'll just ask our officer if there's any additional information we should be cognizant of this evening so that you can be aware of it as well.
No, Chair, there's nothing further to report.
Thank you very much. So what I will do now is just briefly outline the rules for public speaking to make sure everybody knows where we stand. Mr. Kavanagh has 5 minutes to address the committee. These will be timed by our clerk, and an oral warning will be given after 4 of them have elapsed to make sure Mr. Kavanagh doesn't miss any points he thinks are absolutely crucial. Those 5 minutes will be, Mr. Kavanagh, the sum total of your contribution to our debate this evening. So on those terms, I invite you to address the committee.
Well, I appreciate that you have a very long agenda to get through today, so I will speak nowhere near the 5-minute allowance. Thank you very much. As a matter of process and sort of good planning practice, I'm the agent for the application, and if I have an application going to committee, I register myself to speak on the off chance that an objector registers to speak as well. Effectively, because there has been no objections to the application and just some clarifications been provided, I'm here to answer any questions if you have them, and effectively, other than that, I wholly endorse the recommendation of the officer report. And other than that, I have nothing further to add. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Cavanagh. I'm afraid the rules for public speaking preclude the fielding of questions. So
okay, no problem.
We shall, I mean, given that you weren't aware of that, is there anything you wish to briefly say at this moment, or are you just wishing to endorse and recommend this proposal to us?
I think everything's been covered in a lot of detail within the planning package submitted, and then it's been reiterated in the officer's report. So I think that covers all bases. But other than that, I've nothing really to add, to be honest with you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
So, having heard that, I don't think our officer will have anything to comment on. Just make sure that I'm right in saying that.
You're right, Chair.
Thank you very much. So I invite comment from members. If there is no comment from members, I will proceed to a vote. And as I recall, Councillor Jones has declared an interest and he doesn't wish to vote on this matter. Councillor Williams. You're muted, Councillor, I'm afraid.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, permit as recommended. Thank you.
Councillor Reddish.
Permit as a recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Owen.
Permit.
Councillor Moffat.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Holland.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Miss Jill Williams. Can't hear you, Councillor. You're muted, I'm afraid.
Permit, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Burgess.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Northcott.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Cooper.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Maxfield.
Chair.
I think that was permit, Councillor. Is that correct? I couldn't quite hear you.
It was permit, yes.
Thank you very much. In that case, that item is clearly permitted, and we can progress to our next item, item 6. And I believe on this item we have 2 speakers to address us. So I'll ask our clerk to bring them into the meeting, and then I will ask our officer if we have any further information before we begin our debate. So if that could happen first of all. Could I ask Mr. Compton and Mr. Locke if they can both see and hear me at this point in time? I'm afraid you are both muted, gentlemen. So if you could just unmute yourself briefly and indicate that you are indeed present.
Stephen Locke, I'm present.
Thank you very much.
You're muted now. Can you hear me?
I can indeed, yes.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, I can hear you now.
That's super. So before I begin our process of debate this evening, I just want to ask our officer if there's any further information that we all need to know before we begin.
No, there's no further information to report at this time. Thank you.
Okay, so I will now once again outline the procedure for public speaking. So we have 2 speakers on this item. Mr. Compton, who objects to the application, Mr. Locke, who is a supporter of it. Both speakers will have 5 minutes to address the committee. Those will be timed by our clerk, and an oral warning will be given after 4 of those minutes have elapsed to make sure that neither of our speaker feels vital points have been cut off. At that point, when each speaker is finished, that is the sum total of their contribution to our proceedings this evening, and we will proceed with the debate from members. The order is determined by our speakers protocol, and it says that the objector to the scheme speaks first and the supporter of the scheme speaks second. So bearing all that in mind, I now invite Mr. Compton to address the committee on those terms. Mr. Compton.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm new to all this, so here we go. The initial objections are raised to the development regard a lot to the road safety and a few of the aspects of the design. Outlined in the objection were the collection of refuse from the curbside. When all the properties, if it was passed, were eventually occupied, there'd be at least a dozen bins at the top of a 4-metre drive. I think this would cause a lot of obstruction, especially on the bin days. Parking's at a premium up here anyway, especially road parking. It's a walk to school route. It's quite busy. There's 2 bus stops there, as I've outlined. There's no alternative to the council department other than curbside collection. So that's one of them. The traffic flow in and out of the development as well. That's a limited view really, especially when cars are turning in left. It's pavement priority at the minute, and I feel this would need better outlining for safety of pedestrians and other users. The aspects of the development that I oppose to, sorry if I'm rushing it along, I'm nervous, is the height of the proposed garages. The 2-storey coming up for 9 metres, I think it was, 7 metres. The existing building that's there is roughly about 4 metres. I think it'd have a lot more of an impact to what was there over what he wants there now, what the developer would like there. It'll look like a small row of detached houses from the road, from the field, and from the property surrounding it. And the final bit that I object to is the southeast elevation of the Dutch barn, which is onto greenbelt land, directly onto greenbelt land, and the wall is the actual boundary. There's a footpath that runs adjacent to it. It'd be a sad loss if we lost any more greenbelt land to that development, or any access to them footpaths, because they are well used in this area. That about covers it. I'm sorry if I'm not very articulate, but
no, that's absolutely fine. That's the end of your submission this evening. Is that correct, Mr. Compton?
Yes. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think we'll have both our speakers, and then we'll ask our officer to comment on what they've heard. So it's now Mr. Locke's turn to address the committee on the same terms as Mr. Compton. So I invite you to address the committee, Mr. Locke.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
I can indeed.
Excellent. Good evening, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Stephen Locke. I'm the agent for the applicant, Mr. Porter, for this application. He owns the land and buildings at 103 High Street, Harrisey Head, previously known as Ashes Farm. The application is for the conversion of 2 former farm buildings into 2 residential barn conversion units, together with the demolition of an ugly 3rd building between the 2 conversion units, and its replacement with 2 garages to serve each of the barn units. The site is directly located off High Street in Harrisey Head, and it's accessed via a hard track which serves 2 existing houses owned by the applicant, known as number 101, 103 High Street. And if approved, the barn conversions would effectively sort of round off development in this small area of the village. Although the site is technically located in the open countryside, it's adjacent to the existing built development, and we provide 2 new high quality sustainable barn conversions to add to the local housing stock. There are no objections to the development from Staffordshire highways, and parking standards can be met, and there's ample room to turn and leave the barns in a forward gear. Highway officers have confirmed that there's enough room for 2 vehicles to pass one another at the access off High Street, and the new access will be resurfaced to provide a smooth exit and entrance to the site. There's also no objections from either environmental health or the district landscape officer, and the applicant is happy to agree to any suggested conditions as regards landscaping, and also agrees to the conditioning of a construction management plan if that's required to ensure that the conversion works are carried out smoothly and the site is carefully managed. The conversion of 2 existing buildings is a minor development, and the scheme will be completed within a relatively short period of time. In terms of Greenbelt, the National Planning Policy supports the reuse of buildings for alternative uses, and the buildings have been surveyed by an independent structural engineer who's confirmed that they can be easily converted into 2 dwellings with minimal works. And in addition to the barn conversions and to improve the overall setting of the site, it's also proposed to demolish the central building, which is a fairly ugly sort of existing concrete rendered shed, which has got negligible architectural value. And under Greenbelt policy, it is possible to replace existing structures where the new proposed development does not have a greater impact on the openness of the Greenbelt. And in this situation, we propose 2 in-keeping cart shed style garages to replace the concrete rendered shed, which have much of a less of an impact on the openness and will improve the setting and quality of the area. In terms of local amenity, the new barn conversions will have a positive impact on the area, and that there is a footpath that runs to the south of the site, but this will not be affected by the development, and the site will be sympathetically fenced and new hedges planted to create amenity space for each dwelling, and this will also improve the amenity for footpath users. Overall, a number of planning conditions can be agreed to ensure that the site is sensitively developed and the wider locality is safeguarded. Therefore, we'd ask for your support for the application, which meets both local and national planning policy and will provide a welcome, if modest, boost to the local housing supply. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Locke. Before I proceed to a debate, I'm going to do 2 things. The first is to ask our officer what's been said so far, and then I'm going to ask our officer to, if we can, have some plans so that various buildings have been referred to, so that members of the committee can see what's going on in this application.
Yes, okay. In terms of my response to the comments that have been made, I just want to clarify that the height of the proposed garage, that they're close to 7 metres to ridge height, which compares to the building which is to be demolished, which has a ridge height of 4.2 metres. So the proposed garages are taller than the building that is to be demolished. But in terms of the footprint, the garages have a much smaller footprint, and the volume of the building lost is 840 cubic metres, and the garages that replace it have a total of 440 cubic metres. So in terms of volume and footprint, the garages are considerably smaller than the building that they are to replace, and I can show you plans to demonstrate that. The other comment I would make, reference was made by Mr. Locke to the inclusion of a condition requiring a construction management plan to be agreed and adhered to. That is not something that was recommended by the Environmental Health Division. They did recommend that construction hours condition is imposed, and that does form part of the recommendation, but didn't in this case recommend a construction management plan. But if members wish to include such a condition, then it would be deemed to be in accordance with the test for conditions, and it would be an appropriate condition to impose, if not necessarily recommended by the Environmental Health Division. So that's my comments in terms of a response to the comments that have been raised so far. So I'm going to share with you if that's okay, some of the plans that have been submitted. I think, if you bear with me, I will.
I think you'll have to, if I could ask our clerk to make you a co-host, Mrs. Moulton, because otherwise I'm not sure you'll be able to share the screen, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, can you see what I've shared?
No, I cannot. That's the problem. Hang on. I think
that it?
yes, that is fine.
Right. Yes. Sorry, I hadn't actually clicked on what I was meant to click on. So there it is. So this is the site. The plan to the left is the existing layout. So the building, I think you can see my cursor. So the building here is the one referred to the Dutch barn. This is the other barn, the stone built building. So these two buildings are the ones that are to be converted, and the building between them is the building to be demolished. So the one on the left is the proposed layout. So the Dutch barn is converted to a dwelling, the stone building is converted to a dwelling, and the two garages that are proposed are shown in between. I will show you the elevations, which are, hopefully you can see that now. So the stone built building is the building on the top. The Dutch barn is the building on the bottom, and the garages, they're identical but handed in terms of their internal layout and the position of the external staircase is the buildings that are shown on the right. I'll zoom in a little closer so you can see them. So they are tall in terms of their overall height because they've got a steeply pitched roof, and there is storage space within the roof of that building. But in terms of as I indicated, the overall volume of the two garages is considerably smaller than the building that they replace, which I can show you now. So that, hopefully you can see this plan. So that it is a long, relatively squat building, so it's considerably lower, but taking up a larger footprint and a larger amount of the overall site. I think going back to the proposed, the sites plan, so that the reference was made to the taking up of more of a green belt. Well, the site is entirely within the green belt, and there is no proposal within the current application to extend the curtilage of the buildings further out into the open countryside. At the moment, there is a footpath, a definitive footpath, which runs down the side of the building and round the back. That will remain, and the proposal doesn't involve any encroachment onto that footpath, so there will be no need to seek a diversion of the footpath. It should be unaffected by the development. I'll go back to the proposed elevations just to show you that there will be some windows within the farm conversion that will look onto the footpath. So that's the elevation that faces onto the footpath. So there will be some overlooking of the footpath, but there will be no encroachment of buildings onto that footpath.
Could I just ask Mrs. Moulton, if we look at the whole screen, if you pull out slightly, are all of these drawings to the same scale? In other words, we can get a sense there of the size of the garage vis-a-vis the properties, or are they drawn to slightly different scales?
No, they're all to the same scale. They're all to scale 1 to 100. So all buildings. So the height of the garage is comparable to the height, possibly slightly taller than the height of the stone building, and a comparable height to the height of the Dutch barn, which has a curved roof. It isn't a pitched roof as is the case with the stone building.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Moulton. Before could I ask you to stop sharing the screen so that the screen comes back? Councillor Maxfield has had a hand up for a long time, so I shall take Councillor Maxfield, then Councillor Williams, then Councillor Northcott.
Thanks, Chair. Just lower my hand. Right, there you go. First of all, I don't actually have an issue with regards to bringing existing building back into use. I think it's appropriate design for the area. The issue I've got is with the garages. Can I just confirm with the officer? She said, I made a note that the height of the property is 4.2 metres and the garage is 7 metres.
The height of the building that is being demolished is 4.2 metres and the height of the garage is practically 7 metres. I think it's 6.97 in total.
The council will tell me if I'm putting words in her mouth, but I thought her question was as regards the buildings which are to be converted into dwellings. I mean, what's the relative height of those vis-a-vis the garages, Mrs. Moulton?
You'll have to bear with me because I haven't got that measurement to hand. I'll just have to do that measurement. Just bear with me. I just need to get the scale right. Just bear with me. I'll measure again. So the height of the stone building is approximately 6 metres to ridge. And the Dutch barn is about 6.5 metres to its very top height. So yes, the garage to its at ridge height is taller than both the buildings that are to be converted.
Thank you. Right. Okay. So
Really.
So the garage is essentially going to be comparable to the buildings, but that in itself, I mean, maybe it's me, but actually, why would you want a 7 metre tall garage by your house? I mean, that is, if the garage is the same height as the property, then it's essentially another property. So I've got a few concerns about what that's actually going to be looking at it being developed into beyond a garage. So that's my first concern about that. The other concern I've got is with regards to I want the reassurances on the public footpath. In particular, the accessibility will remain in operation during and after construction, with the proposal of the improved facilities for users. However, that is however that's going to actually look at, you know, what are those proposed improved facilities. So yeah, you know, I don't have a problem with the converting of the Dutch barn. I think that is wholly appropriate. It's in the area. It's been bringing that building back into use. But I do have an issue. It's quite a significant height for 2 garages, 7 metres, even if you're saying it's storage at the top. So that is sort of putting a few flags up for me. And then, like I say, I just want the reassurances on the footpath. That's how it stands. I know the area extremely well, so hence the reason why I'm raising the thanks.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 things really. I heard what the officer said about the footpath. Just the concern that the new build, I think, is coming right onto the footpath. As the old build, am I right in saying that? And the old building, the new building be on the same footprint, right next door to the footpath. And when building it, I'd like to keep the footpath open. And also, I'm interested in the Dutch barn and the whole development, really. What materials are going to be used, especially on the Dutch barn and on the particular one with the outside staircase? So it'll be interesting what the officer says about the materials being used, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't know if perhaps Mrs. Moulton could answer that now, rather than it getting lost in a morass of questions.
Okay, well, the Dutch barn is a brick building, and the works, well, there's a number of new openings proposed, but where the existing openings are to on the front elevation are to be enclosed, they're proposing weathered larch cladding, and the roof will be replaced with a crimp seam galvanized steel roofing, sheet roofing. So that's what is proposed for the Dutch barn, which is a predominantly brick building. There's just alterations to form new openings on the stone building. So there's no, the intention is to retain the existing, or to retain tiles on the roof, which is the existing roofing materials. In terms of the garage, it's to be a timber structure with a brindle clay tiled roof. So it's got the appearance of a, in some authorities, they describe them as car barns. They're a sort of a wooden structure with a traditional in appearance with a tiled roof. So it's a timber construction.
I think the councillor also referred to things being close to the footpath. I don't know if you could take us through that, Mrs. Moulton.
Yes, I'll share the site plan again. Hopefully you can see that.
Yes.
So the new buildings are these two buildings here. So the new build buildings aren't sited directly adjacent to the site boundary. They're within the site, away from the boundary. You can see the outline of the existing building that is to be demolished by the dash line there. The Dutch barn, the existing building, is this building here, and its rear elevation does form the part of the boundary of the site. So it is right on the boundary of the site, and the footpath runs directly adjoining that. So there's no proposals to build that, but there will be works on that rear elevation because there are some openings to be included. So there potentially some impact on the footpath temporarily while those works are undertaken, but such works will be are limited in terms of their overall scale, and shouldn't take too long, and I would anticipate any impact on the footpath could be addressed through a minor diversion over a short period of time, and it will be for the developer to agree that with the county council as a footpath, as the rights of way authority. So yeah, so there will be some impact during construction, but it will be limited, and there will no impact post completion of the development. The footpath will continue to run along that rear elevation of the Dutch barn and skirt around the side of the site and to the rear of the site.
Thanks very much, Mrs. Moulton. Again, now you've just anticipated me and unshared the screen. Councillor Northcott, I think, was next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I've got no problems with bringing old buildings back. The disused ones that can't be used can't be found for them, and bringing them into this century. I've got no problems with that. What I have got problems with is trying to dress up plans, and I think rather cynically, the way that the site's been diced up and that the scale and height of the garages would seem to suggest that this is leading down two properties that are going to be in place of the garage in the future with existing plans, and they will have established by then the height factor and form factor. And the way that they've been staggered would make it very nice and easy to divide up into those properties. The materials that are being used for the construction of the garage doesn't, to me, inspire me full of confidence for permanency. These could be easily taken down with a minimal of costs in terms of if one wished to build a house there in each place of each garage. And I think, you know, given in line the nature of the highways haven't objected to this because of the access point and the fact that there's 3 shared drives. Suddenly in the future, it becomes 4 additional properties with access onto this particularly narrow drive. Then we've got a different kettle of fish on our hands. So I'm not convinced that we need to have those garages that are that high and the form of the windows that they've got in there. It strikes me that these are masquerading as houses and not garages, which is a different thing. That's just my 10 pence worth. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Moffat.
All right.
Thank you, Chair. So thank you to people who came along this evening to express their concerns and support. I share the concerns actually that have been voiced by other councillors in the on this planning committee. I simply don't see why any garage should be 7 metres. I kind of echo the words of Mr. Compton in saying that the consequence of having them that high is like having 5 detached or 4 detached houses all built in that area. So I am concerned about that. Because it's got kind of greenbelt concerns as well. Is there any opportunity to put this to the Conservation Advisory Working Party to have a look at in more detail, particularly around things like the materials used and kind of protecting the integrity really of the area? I am worried as well about a works management plan because you know, the speaker did mention that at times things become very, very busy. It's there's very little parking access for other residents in the area. So again, in terms of not causing huge amounts of disruption to people who live there, I think that quite a lot of careful consideration needs to be, some detail needs to be put around how all of this is going to be managed, to be honest. And I think in line with the Borough Council's advice, when significant building is taking place, local people should be consulted about when work should happen, and also to be able to give advice about when the busy times are, and kind of, you know, I'm really minded to express these concerns because it doesn't affect any of us sitting here in this meeting, but it does affect a number of other people. So I do have concerns, some that I share with other councillors this evening.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Chair. I do share concerns that other members have raised about the height of the garages. I wouldn't necessarily have any objections to make in regard of the 2 buildings that are to be redeveloped as dwelling houses. This is an application, this is one of our very special circumstances applications about impact on the green belt. I was interested to hear our officers' comments quantifying the impact on the openness of the green belt in terms of the footprint of those two garages compared to the footprint of the existing structure on the site, and also the combined volume of those. We have seen copies of the plans, and I think if you do take into account the hard standing that's intended to be created in front of those garages, there is an argument to be drawn, I think, that the impact on the openness of the green space is about the same. The space that they are going to have tarmacked over will be roughly the same as the space that's currently occupied by the structure that's on the site now. So if we were to advance a refusal as a planning committee on the grounds that it is unacceptable development in the green belt and it's not very special, that would be the area in which I would be looking. If it is possible for us to approve the application, which I'm sure members would like to do if that's a possibility, I wonder if there are any comments that our officers have to make in terms of the potential future development of the site. If members are concerned that these garages are not in fact garages, do they come with any permitted development rights? And if so, is it possible for this committee to restrict permitted development rights such that if any future conversion of those garages into dwelling houses was to take place, it would certainly have to come back in front of us? I do have some other thoughts, but I'll pause there because that seems to be the area of concern for a few councillors.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Northcott's hand has gone up and gone down. I don't know if you wish to speak again, Councillor. Otherwise, I'll ask Mrs. Moulton to address the questions that Councillor Holland has.
Thank you for your indulgence, Chair. Councillor Holland raised a good point, and he covered the avenue which I wish to go down in the main. The fact that this is Greenbelt, the scale and formation of the height of the garages combined with the conversions of the two buildings would be significant in the Greenbelt and is above and beyond what I think we should be looking at. The difficulty, of course, that we've got two houses there, special requirements that are being converted into housing in the Greenbelt. We're accepting that in principle. We've been asked to accept that, should I say. That I'm perfectly fine with that. What I don't accept is turning two houses and suddenly into four in the future. That obviously would have to come here, but I would agree with Councillor Holland. Can we not look at permitted development rights or restricting that in the future in some kind? Thank you.
I think that you're quite right, that Councillor Northcott, that does seem to be the concern of quite a lot of people on the committee. So I'd ask Mrs. Moulton if she could address that, particularly with the question of permitted development rights.
Well, certainly there's no permitted development rights that would enable the conversion of the garages into dwellings. Any proposal of that nature would require a further planning application, and consideration could be given to the acceptability of the use of those buildings for independent dwellings, and the impact that has on in terms of the access, the increased use of the access, and any other issues that would raise. Any dwelling, there are permitted development rights to extend and to put up additional buildings, outbuildings, all of which could have an impact on the openness of the green belt. And we have, as an authority in the past, removed permitted development rights to limit the impact of development on the openness of the green belt, and have on occasion been unsuccessful at defending such conditions when there has been an appeal lodged against them. In this particular case, we are dealing with barn conversions, and obviously any extensions to those buildings would change the character and appearance of those barns, and you could justify removal of PD rights from a visual point of view. and we have been successful in securing and maintaining conditions, removing PD rights for outbuilding. So that is something that members could consider, and if they wish to impose that, I think as officers we will be supportive of that. Turning to the comment about the impact on the openness of the greenbelt, on the appearance of the greenbelt, and stating that the proposed garages plus the hard standings has a similar impact to the building that is to be removed. In terms of the plot coverage, it possibly is comparable, but it's spatially, looking at the volumes of what is being proposed and what is being removed, than what is proposed has less of an impact, because the volume is only just slightly more than half the volume of the building that is to be removed. So spatially, this has less of an impact on the greenbelt than the existing situation and the building that's there at the moment. If members are unhappy with the garages and don't consider that they can support the recommendation of permission with those garages within the development in the form that they are shown on the submitted plans, you do have two options. You can refuse the application for reasons that I would need to understand, or you could defer the application and seek your officers to discuss amendments to the garage, just to secure amendments that result in a reduced height of the buildings or other alterations to that building. We, as officers, we could go away and negotiate such amendments and bring the amended scheme back to the next planning committee or to a future planning committee. So that's an option that you have. I just wanted to make one final comment with regard to the suggestion that the application be put to the Conservation Advisory Working Party for their comment. This is not a proposal that we would take to the Conservation Advisory Working Party, because it's not within a conservation area. These aren't listed buildings. It's not a historic farmstead. This is not something that it's within their remit to comment upon. We can seek the views of the council's conservation officer on the nature of the proposed garages, the materials that are suggested for the construction of such buildings, but it wouldn't be appropriate to take the application to the Conservation Advisory Working Party for their comments.
Could I, sorry, Mr. Moulton, no, do continue. I thought you finished.
No, I was just going to say, I think I've covered everything that was raised, but yes.
Could I just explore two parts of your answer before calling Councillor Maxfield again? The first was, I mean, you spoke about permitted development rights and outbuildings. Do the garages count as outbuildings in that regard? Or are we talking about a garden shed or some such? I mean, I think it would be useful for members to know precisely what outbuilding means in this context.
Well, outbuildings, any building that is constructed for purposes incidental to the enjoyment of the dwelling house. So a garage could be constructed under permitted development rights, under Class E of the relevant part of the general permitted development order. So potentially further garages could be constructed within the curtilages of those properties should permitted development rights not be removed. But given that the proposal involves the inclusion of garages, then yes, I think it's likely that any removal of PD rights of that nature would bring within the control of the local planning authority the construction of garden sheds and buildings of that nature. Yes, and the fact that there is that building within the curtilage of the properties within the scheme, if that scheme was permitted, that wouldn't the existence of the garage wouldn't limit the amount of outbuildings that could be constructed. Anything up to 50% of the curtilage could be covered without building, subject to other criteria, and without the removal of PD rights, they could be constructed or installed without the need for planning permission.
Thank you. My second question is about the impact on the green belt, and I'm not saying that I'm proposing this. I just think that some members, it may be in their minds, it would be useful to raise the question. We've talked about the size of the footprint and such like. What we haven't talked about is the height of these structures. Could an argument be constructed that they detract from the openness of the green belt by nature of their height rather than by nature of their footprint?
It is about the visual perception of buildings, and yes, the height of a building does affect your perception of it, and potentially can be seen to have a greater impact on openness than a building of a comparable volume, but with of a lower height. Yeah, so yeah, it can be seen to have a greater impact. In this particular case, whilst it is higher, the view of the officer is that the reduction in the volume of building that will be on the site as a result of the demolition of the building that's already on site counteracts any impact from the increased height of those garages.
Thank you, Ms. Moulton. No, I just was interested in the question of height, whether it could be ruled out entirely or whether it's there as a variable. I will take Councillor Maxfield. I know Councillor Holland raised his hand first, but I know he's also a gentleman, so I think probably Councillor Maxfield first.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Holland. Again, you know, I'll just come back to what I said originally. Is I don't have an issue with regards to the bringing the existing Dutch barn and the likes back into use. It still comes back down to the height of these garages, and the thing I was actually putting to before, other members have all said the same, that the concern is at some point or other this is going to come back with a planning consent application of change of dwelling status. Essentially, it's 4 properties turn it into a 4 property area. I understand what the officer says about, you know, that planning consent's got to come back again, but from experience, any change of dwelling status doesn't actually come to us as a committee. It actually would go to a designated officer, which means that it would bypass this, and then this conversation that we're having is moot. Is there some way that we can actually have it put in as a recommendation to committee that any future change of dwelling status comes to us and not goes to designated officer? I'm looking at being able to shut down any kind of loophole opportunities that might come our way or come the way on of the development in the future. So that's the question.
Okay, well, any application that we receive under the current scheme of delegation, there is a right to, as you're aware, to call in an application to committee for a decision. So it doesn't automatically, well, it may start the process as being earmarked as a delegated decision, but if the calling procedures were followed, then the application will be brought to committee should it be submitted for committee to determine the application. We can put a note on the site to highlight that committee have requested that the application, should it be received, be brought to committee for a decision, and we would take that into consideration in deciding whether to exercise any delegated authority there may be to determine that application. And we would, if at the date that the application came in and the note was still there, we would honour that request. But yes, there is a right to call in the application, should that be thought appropriate by members.
think we should be a little bit careful there, Mrs. Moulton. I mean, delegation is delegation to an authority, not from one. So if the committee say they wish to receive this again, I don't think it is in the gift of office to say, you know, you cannot. Quite the reverse, in fact. But nonetheless, I hear what you say. Councillor Holland.
Has yet recommended or proposed refusing this application on the grounds of unacceptable development in the green belt, although I heard the officer's comments in response to your earlier question, Chair, about whether or not the height is relevant to that perceived impact and that actual impact on the openness of the green belt. If any member was wanting to test the strength of that particular argument, I would be amenable to voting in favour of it. Alternatively, I would certainly myself be happy to propose adding to the recommendation a restriction of any and all permitted development rights applying to these conversions and the associated works that can be justified, again, by reference to our officer's comments previously. I did have one separate issue to raise, which was that of access. I do understand the Highways Authority has no objections, but quite commonly the Highways Authority has no objections, and I'm not especially interested in what they've got to say. Have any of our officers, as the council, as the authority that collects the waste from these dwelling houses and these proposed conversions, have any of our officers seen the plans, and is it possible for one of our refuse wagons to get round the proposed turning circle? What I'm trying to understand is how we are expecting waste to be presented, and to give the objector, who is still with us in the meeting, a fair shake. That was something that he had raised as to whether or not this is going to cause obstruction to the highway through the presentation of domestic waste. Because so far as I can see, and we haven't at any point taken a look at photographs of the site, so far as I can see, it would not be possible to present bins along the access road and to do so on the public highway, which is the main road at the opening to this development, might well pose problems. So is it possible for waste to be collected from outside of these barn conversions? Thank you.
It is acknowledged within the report that a refuse vehicle wouldn't access the properties. They wouldn't drive along the access drive and collect from outside of the front of the properties. The waste would have to be presented on the highway, adjacent to the highway at the entrance to the site. The views of the council's waste section haven't been received, so I'm not able to point to what their comments are. All I can advise is that the Highway Authority do consider that, as well as issues of vehicular access associated with the day-to-day use of a residential property, and they were satisfied that that the access was suitable for the additional dwellings proposed, and that there was adequate width and visibility at the point of access onto the main road.
Councillor Reddish.
Thank you. Councillor Holland has alluded to both of the points I was going to make. Do we have any pictures of the point where the footpath goes onto the highway, just to see if we can see for ourselves whether we think bins can be accommodated on the high street? And the other one was when Mrs. Moulton was talking about alternative recommendations. I didn't hear us say permit with removal of development rights. I think that's an option I may be quite interested in. So perhaps just clarification from Mrs. that she actually thinks we can do that with removal.
Mabel.
Can I ask Mr. Walters if you could mute your microphone, please? Because I think we're hearing about your dog. Thank you. Mrs. Moulton.
Okay, I can share with you a photograph at the point of entrance to the site. So this is at where the access meets the highway. So it stood within the access point looking in a southerly direction, I believe. And that's looking in the other direction. So the point of entry is relatively wide, and there is the opportunity for bins to be presented on the highway without it causing an obstruction. So I can show you the other photographs if that would assist while I've got them open.
Why not?
I found that quite helpful. I think that's answered what I was thinking.
So that's just catching the edge of the point of access. So obviously taken on a different day. So this apologies, I didn't mean to click on that. Oh well, it shows a similar view of the footpath running down the side of the
No, it's the point with the highway that I was particularly interested in.
Yeah, now we have the other photographs. I think we might as well have them, Councillor.
Yeah. So this is the building to be demolished.
Mr. Chairman, if I could help, as far as the footpath's concerned onto the highway, it runs on the side of the house, the left-hand side of the house we're looking at now. It's on the opposite side of that house that comes off the highway and runs the back of that house and back of the barn, if that helps.
Thank you.
The footpath does not run down this lane. It runs
No, it doesn't. Sorry, that's correct. It doesn't run along the access track to the site. It runs to the side of the dwelling that sits alongside the access track, the existing dwelling that fronts onto the main road. So this is one of the existing properties within the site. It's in the blue edge land that was shown on the layout plan. Another photograph of the building to be demolished. And so this is looking down the access track. So that building in the mist is the stone building to be converted, and that's the end of the building to be demolished. And there's the front elevation of the Dutch barn. I think we might be at the end of the photos. Well, this is looking back towards the main road.
I think we're thanks for those, Mrs. Moulton. I think we're pretty clear now as to what we're looking at. I also think we need to move towards some sort of resolution of this. And as I see it, there are a variety of things we could do. Obviously, we could accept the recommendations as printed. We could, my understanding is, please correct me if I'm wrong, vote for the removal of some or all permitted development rights upon the site. We could obviously refuse the recommendation, though a reason would have to be formulated for that. I think there are possibilities there, maybe. And the other one, which I think you yourself suggested, is we could move for deferral for some discussion about, in particular, the height of the proposed garages. So really, I think I'm looking to members to see if there is enthusiasm for any of those given options.
I think I would like to propose permit, but the removal of development rights, unless somebody's got something else to say.
I'll second that. Thank you.
Councillor Moffat.
I would like to defer, particularly in relation to the height of those garages.
Councillor Maxfield.
Could I propose to refuse on scale and form of the height of the garages, that this represents unacceptable additional development and it has a cumulative impact on the special circumstances on the greenbelt that we're being asked to consider?
So we've got in essence three things. Permit with the removal of permitted development rights has been seconded by Councillor Williams, so that we will certainly take a vote on that. I now look to other members to see if there is a seconder for Councillor Moffat's proposal of deferral. Councillor Jones?
I would like to second Councillor Moffat.
Okay, and finally, there's Councillor Maxfield, who wishes to refuse for the reason she stated. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Northcott.
Happy to second that, Chair.
Okay, so I think the obvious order that all of these have now been proposed and seconded is I'm going to take Councillor Maxfield's proposal that we refuse, and I'll come back to reasons in a second. First, I will then take Councillor Moffat. If that falls, obviously if it passes, it passes. If it falls, I will take Councillor Moffat's proposal that this item be deferred. And then if that falls, I will take Councillor Reddish's proposal that we permit but remove permitted development rights. So now I'm going to come back to Councillor Maxfield and ask for the grounds on which you are proposing refusal.
Thanks, Chair. Refuse on the scale and form of the height of the garages, that it represents unacceptable additional development and has a cumulative impact on the special circumstances on the greenbelt.
Okay, I'll just ask our officer if those they sound reasonable. I mean, she may not agree, of course, with them, but nonetheless, the question is whether they are good grounds for refusal.
Yes, I think we would suggest that it's you would conclude that the garages constitute an appropriate development in the green belts, and that the harm by virtue of their scale, form and height is such that very special circumstances don't exist to justify such an appropriate development in the green belt. So it's very similar to what Councillor Maxfield said, but as more in line with the national policy on greenbelt development.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Maxfield, as a formulated reason?
I'm happy, Chair, thank you.
Okay, so I'm now going to take a vote on Councillor Maxfield's proposal, which, in other words, if you vote for this, you are voting for refusal. Councillor Williams.
Against refusal, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Reddish.
Against refusal.
Councillor Owen.
Against, Chair.
Councillor Moffat.
For, Chair.
Councillor Mrs. Jill Williams. I can't hear you, Councillor.
Against, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Holland.
For the refusal as it's been formulated, Chair.
Councillor Northcott.
For, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Burgess.
For, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Maxfield.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
I just ask our clerk to top that up. I think that is carried.
That's carried, Chair.
Okay.
7 for and 3 and 4 against.
Thank you very much for that. So that item is refused for the grounds stated. We can therefore progress to item 7 of our agenda this evening, which again is an application from the University of Kiel. I don't believe there are any speakers on this item. There is a supplementary agenda which members should have had sight of. I'll just ask our officer if there's any further information this evening.
No, Chair, nothing further to report.
I invite some comment from members. Councillor Moffat.
I'd like to support the proposal permit.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Holland.
I will second Councillor Moffat in moving the recommendations as printed, Chair.
Have you got any further comments from members this evening before I proceed to a vote? that case, I will proceed to a vote. Councillor Williams.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Reddish.
Permit, please.
Councillor Owen.
Permit.
Councillor Moffat.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Mrs. Jill Williams.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Holland. I can't hear you, Councillor.
Permit, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Northcott.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Burgess.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Maxfield.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Cooper.
Permit, Chair.
That item is clearly passed, and we can proceed to our next item, application for other development, Oakley Hall, Oakley Market, Drayton. I believe we have a speaker on this item. So if the speaker is with us, I'll ask that he be introduced to the room.
The application has been withdrawn.
Ah,
Yeah, there was a supplementary published this afternoon, so yes, it was only just withdrawn.
okay. Thank you very much. I'm clearly not with it this evening. Let us progress to item 9, application for other development, the Notton Community Centre. And again, there's a supplementary report. Don't know if our officer has anything further to add.
No, just to say that the Environmental Health Division are supportive of the information submitted to satisfy those conditions of the prior approvals for demolition of the buildings.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Moulton. I therefore open the item for debate and discussion. Councillor Reddish?
I move the recommendations.
Councillor Moffat?
I'd like to second Councillor Reddish's proposal. It's very exciting and great for the local community.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Are there any further comments from members? In that case, I will proceed to a vote. Councillor Williams?
Agree. Permit, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Reddish?
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Owen?
Permit.
Councillor Moffat?
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Mrs. Jill Williams?
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Holland?
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Northcott?
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Burgess?
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Jones?
Permit.
Councillor Maxfield?
Permit.
Councillor Cooper? I can't hear you, Councillor.
Permit.
Thank
Sorry.
you. That item, therefore, is clearly permitted, and we can progress to item 10. I draw members' attention to item 15 of our agenda at this juncture, but item 10, 5 Bogs Cottages, Keele. Again, I ask our officer if there is anything further to add at this moment.
No, nothing further to add other than to advise a site visit was undertaken last week and there was no breaches planning control observed on that visit.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Moulton. Are there any other comments from members, or are we content to receive this report?
Yes, Chair.
Receive it.
I'm looking at the screen. I don't see any further contributions, so I'll say that we are going to simply receive the report. I'll progress to item 11, land at Doddlespill, Beckley. Again, you see the report in front of you. I invite comments. I see no wish to comment. Therefore, once again, am I correct in assuming we are happy to receive this report?
Yes, Chair.
In that case, let's progress to item 12, the half-yearly report on planning obligations. Again, I'll just ask our officer if there's anything to add to this report, which we've all received.
No, nothing to add, thank you.
And again, I invite comment from members if they wish to make such comments. I don't know if Councillor Reddish wished to make a comment there, or she's simply adjusting her set.
Yeah, I've tried to raise my hand, you wouldn't go. Page 75, the Randall's Garage. I am quite disappointed that the County Council Legal Department are not progressing this, and I would like to know the rationale really behind why they are against our recommendation. So I'm just wondering if officers could seek clarification as to why they don't wish to proceed with paying the NTADs.
I'm sure we could draft a letter of inquiry. Is that correct, Mrs. Moulton? And then perhaps it could be reported back to this committee at our next meeting?
Yes, I think that question may have already been posed to the County Council, but I'm not aware that we've received a response yet. But if we haven't made that request, we will send it and we will report the response that we've received at a future date.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments about this report from members? In that case, are we content to receive this report? In that respect, let's move to item 13, quarterly report on extensions, time periods, etc. Again, the report is in front of you, and I invite comments or questions from members. I see no indication of comments or questions. Once again, are we content to receive this report?
Yes, Chair.
That brings us to item 14, which is an appeal decision. Again, you had sight of this decision. I'm not sure that there are any general principles to be adduced from this. I ask our officer if she shares my opinion.
I do, yes.
And again, I invite comment from members should they wish to make some. Again, I see no wish to make comments, so I take it we are content to receive this appeal report. That brings us to item 15, which is not particularly common with this committee, but it, as you can see, is to resolve that the public now be excluded from our meeting during the consideration of the following items, because it is likely that there will be a disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 6, part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act of 1972.
Excuse me, Chair, I just need to end the YouTube stream before we continue.
Yes, but let's vote for it first, if we may, because for all I know, members may disagree in this regard. But do we wish to so resolve that the public be excluded? Could I see a visible show of hands, please, on screen? That's a clear majority, if not unanimous. So we do so resolve, and at that point, I will ask our clerk to stop the YouTube recording.